Good evening, and welcome to the virtual opening and poetry reading to celebrate InLiquid exhibition, Danny Simmons Studio Time. This exhibition is on view through February 20th at the InLiquid Gallery here in Philadelphia. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment and thank PNC Arts Alive for supporting the InLiquid Gallery and our Everyone is a Collector campaign. We would also like to thank the Philadelphia Cultural Fund and the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts for their support of InLiquid, and our many generous individual donors. It's people like you who make our free public programming accessible. I would like to begin by welcoming Danny Simmons, as well as his special guests, Rafael Timberino and Susan Cahan, and give them a big thank you for joining us this evening. Danny Simmons is an American abstract painter from Queens, New York, who once coined his particular style of painting as Neo-African abstract expressionism. Simmons's visual artworks are held in numerous public collections, including the Smithsonian, the United Nations, the US State Department, the Brooklyn Academy of Music, the Brooklyn Museum, Chase Manhattan Bank, Deutsche Bank, Schoenberg Center for Black Culture, among with numerous private collections. Simmons holds a bachelor's degree in social work from New York University, a master's in public finance from Long Island University, and is the recipient of an honorary PhD from Long Island University. He is also a co-founder, along with his siblings Russell and Joseph Simmons, and current president of the Rush Arts Gallery. He is also founder and VP of the Rush Philanthropic Arts Foundation. He continues to thrive at his home gallery in Northern Liberties, Philadelphia. Tonight, we will enjoy a walkthrough of Danny Simmons Studio Time, where we can see some of Danny's newest visual artworks, as well as hear some of Danny's latest poetry, all of which were made during the quarantine this past year. Danny, along with our esteemed guests, will be discussing the striking artwork within the show, giving us their insights of these never-before-seen works. Later in the evening, Susan and Danny will then dive into the subject of collecting, discussing Danny's own collection of work, as well as Susan's collection of Danny's work. So Danny, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me here. I mean, this is a great exhibition space. I mean, when I first came here, a friend of mine, Joe Brenman, who passed away last year, brought me in here, and I immediately loved this space. And to be having a solo show here is really gratifying and a tribute, really, to Joe. He was a sculptor here in Philadelphia, my dear friend, and so I'm dedicating this show to Joe Brenman. I'm supposed to read a poem now, and I started writing, I think it's now, but anyway, I would do it in a few minutes. I started writing a new book at the start while I was doing, these paintings, but they don't relate to each other really. But I was writing about America really during Trumpism and the 4 years of Trump. And some of them are more revolutionary than others, but they all are social commentaries on America and the state of being in America. And the poem I'm going to read first is, one day I woke up and I read my news feed and Trump said, "Bad things happen in Philadelphia." And I was like, damn, bad things happen in Philadelphia. So I wrote a poem called "Bad Things Happen in Philadelphia." Let me read that, and then we can move on to other things. I've never read this poem before out loud, so if I screw up, then I guess I screw up. But, all right. Bad things happen in Philadelphia under the cover of night, in blues back alleys with fretting poverty housewives in threadbare linens. Philly has big orange beard boogeymen with bigger bass voices creeping into little jazz clubs, filled with the history of horns and sharp, clean, crisp old men drummers. I'm late to its party in my fancy New Yorker shoes, slip-on suede, cool and casual, smooth like the easy pass ride on the Jersey Turnpike. Hustling, making up for lost time and looking for salvation and grace found in the good neighborhoods where the white folks dine outdoors, gobbling chicken cheese steaks made Philly style. There are bad black badlands, red-eyed things lurking deeper in the real Philly, north of Girard and closer to the sirens blaring, false fear and pockets of drugs and abandonment. I've nudged my way into the weave of this story, sliding in, shining, talking New York slick shit about art and comic books, and the way things used to be when Brooklyn came hard and righteous, the way it went down. I've heard it said, bad things happen in Philadelphia, but all I can feel is the good Philly love and hot breath pulsing beneath my feet. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. And so we're seeing here kind of the first wall of the gallery. I don't know if you want to say a few words about any of these particular paintings that we're seeing now.
I don't know if I can really talk about the particular paintings, but I do want to talk about the impulse and the whole environment that these paintings were created under, and what I'm trying to express in each one. So where are we starting now? We're starting with this one, and that's actually what we call the beginning of the show. And this one is titled Going Viral. And I wasn't talking about, like Facebook viral. I was really talking about how viral the virus is. And so this exhibition is named Studio Time because all of a sudden I found myself with so much studio time. I was like, wow, I'm not going outside. I'm not going to interact with a whole lot of people. And, Rush, my gallery over on Old York Road in the Logan section, we had to close down. And so, I was writing, and I was writing this book called Red, which I'll talk about a little bit more. But I said, let me try to create a body of work that really speaks to what we're going through. And what I was trying to get to is the connection between all of us, even in our socially distant isolation, how important our connections are and how important it is for us to stay in touch with each other. And so Facebook was one thing, but making sure you call people and making sure people were well. And so this whole body of work is about interconnectedness and myself connecting with spirit and this. So that's what I want to say. Now, this painting that we're looking at is part of a triptych. And there were three paintings. They're all 48 by 48, 60 by 60 inches. And they weren't done at the same time. They were done individually. I think this is the second one in the series. And I was very conscious. Let me put it this way. This is the most conscious I've been about creating artwork that spoke to each other directly. I wanted to make sure that this series of artwork was cohesive and really spoke to the moment. And so all the paintings that I did really talked to each other and were interrelated. So we can move on to the next piece. I honestly believe this next piece is the first piece I did in this series. It's a little different because it has more. There's some disconnection in it, but the dripping lines in the red really was speaking about how much. When I started hearing about all the death happening. And I had a few friends that died, but hearing about friends were talking about hearing the ambulances running up and down their block all the time, and then hearing about in New York City the meat trucks full of bodies, and so the dripping, the red really sort of talked to me about what was going on at that moment, and it's still going on. We're way across 400,000 deaths now with this. But the studio really helped me process all of what was going on. The ability to be creative and to create this work really helped me to feel grounded and safe, even actually feel safe in my studio. And so I was painting pretty much every day and writing. And so this whole thing had a silver lining. Really, it allowed me to deeply explore uninterrupted my creative impulses. We're just going to look at this one. This is an early one in the series also. Um, but you could see the interconnectedness of the circles. Each of the circles either represents human beings or spirits. I'm not quite sure whether it's our spirit that I'm representing or our physical being. Sometimes it's both, but it's all about the interconnectedness between us and spirit and us connecting with also a higher power to help us get through this.
It's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Danny. So our first special guest of this evening is Rafael Timberino. Raphael is an artist, a teacher, and the president of the Tiberino Museum here in Philadelphia. Raphael's history is split between Philadelphia and New York City, which is where he initially met Danny Simmons. Tonight, he will speak to their histories and his thoughts on Danny's current body of work seen here in the exhibition.
Hey guys, how are you?
Raph, what's up, baby?
What's going on? What's going on?
Thank you for taking the time and coming on and, kicking it.
You got it. You got it. It's a beautiful show, Danny. I definitely enjoyed getting in there and seeing it live and being amongst it all.
Cool. I have to remind you, you can make an appointment to come see this work live.
So what I'm going to do is talk a little bit about how I met the man himself up in New York and how he ended up getting down here to the city of brotherly love. First met Danny back in, it was either 96 or 97 at Subculture Gallery in New York. I was one of the people who co-founded Subculture New York. There was a party going on. I believe you were the one who were the host of that party, Danny. It was a Rakim record release.
Yeah, I had done the record cover for I can't remember the name now, but I didn't do it myself. It wasn't my art. I had curated it for Universal Records and art directed this album cover, and we had the party at your place.
Gotcha. So there was another artist who shared the basement studio. He had a studio next to mine. His name was Makudi Saul. And I guess Danny was friends with him at that point.
Right.
So we kind of shook hands, hit it off, but that was pretty much it. Like, hey, nice to meet you. The rest of the night went on, whatever. New York was an extremely magical time for me at that point. I moved up in 96, being a young artist, being in New York, being in that Soho, Little Italy neighborhood, having my studio in the basement of the gallery I was showing at. It was just every day was a wonder as far as I was concerned. I was able to just paint every day, go out. The streets were always full of energy and life. And I had always loved New York. So the next logical step in my artistic evolution was to be up there every day, be in the thick of it, which I was. And I met Danny during that time. So I guess a year or so later, a buddy of mine who was sharing the studio with me that I knew from high school, Terrence Boncole, got a residency at the Henry Street Settlement. Went over there, and Danny was there again. So that day, we pretty much just started talking a lot more smack. And, oh, you like comics? I like comics. You like movies? I like movies. You like this? I like that. Seemed like kindred spirits to me. So that was the time where we really realized that we were brothers from another mother, so to speak. Subculture was a wonderful time, but great times like that tend to end. And September 11th was pretty much the end of the gallery. After September 11th, I didn't really feel comfortable living that close to it anymore, like a lot of people did. And I ended up moving over to Brooklyn, to Clinton Hill, where my girlfriend lived. I moved in with her, like a lot of other New York couples did at the time. It was like everyone was shell-shocked in terms of, oh, more planes could be coming down at any point. I want to be close to the person I'm close with. And Danny was my neighbor. So what was it, Wednesday where you used to have people over, Danny?
Sunday.
For some reason, for me and you, it was either Wednesday or Thursday.
Oh,
we'll go over. You always had your new comics out. We started talking. The first time I went over, I was extremely impressed with his mix of comic books and collectibles, but also his paintings and how he painted and how every one thing was all hodgepodge together. Not only that, but Danny also had an island of misfit toys in terms of the people he collected. He never had a closed door to anyone, artist-wise, admirers, fans, just people in general. He always treated everyone the same. People would come over, hang out, talk about art, talk about his studio, talk about life, etc. Actually, I was at a party one time at Danny's place, a 4th of July party, partying with all these great guys. I didn't watch TV when I lived in New York, really. So years later, when I moved back to Philly and started watching The Wire, I realized all those guys I was hanging out with and drinking with all night were all the cast of The Wire. So that was how Danny was rolling. Those were the parties. It was always a good time. But during that time period, in terms of me being his neighbor and my studio being around the corner, we started talking about me curating shows at the galleries that he had. So I think the first one I did was at Corridor Gallery, which was right next to Danny's home. And then a year or so later, we started talking about Kapow Boom Zap, which was a hodgepodge, my love and Danny's love of comic books, but also fine artists who maybe didn't have a love comics, but had never done comic books, and comic book artists that had a love of painting, but maybe because of their restraints for what they did, never did comic books. So it was a great show of about maybe 15 different artists in Rush Arts. And it was an amazing event. I mean, it was a night where I think the show was supposed to be done by 8, and we were still letting people into the building almost until 12 at night. I mean, people just kept coming and coming and coming and coming. It was a wonderful success and a wonderful show. So at that point, around then, I moved back down to Philly. And I was like, you know something, Danny? Why don't you think about doing a big show at my family museum in West Philadelphia? He said, all right, Tibbs, that sounds good with me. So then we did a big show. We did a big show of his work here at the Tiberino Museum out here in Powton Village. And Danny's energy and the positive and everyone wanting to see this thing so much, even though it was torrential raining all day and a lot of our space is outside, the place was shoulder to shoulder. I mean, the place was packed all day. People were coming through, and it was a wonderful event. So time goes on, years go on. Ends up that me and Danny stayed in touch. He sold that place in Clinton Hill. He moved, where'd you move? Bedford?
No. I moved to Crown Heights.
Crown Heights.
Yeah.
So he moved to Crown Heights. We kept in touch. We always talked occasionally about, the usual stuff, art, life, things of that nature. We were doing a show at the African American Museum of Art, a Tiberino family retrospective show. I guess by this point, we're talking 2014.
Yeah.
The show was called The Unflinching Eye. And what was unique about this show was that it wasn't just me and my family, my siblings, my father and my mother, but we also went for artistic friends, artistic influences. My parents, next to the beginning of the show, each had their favorite professors from art school. There was a painting of each of them next to their pieces, along with maybe 15 other artists that were close to my family and us over the years. And I asked Danny to be a part of it, and he said yes. So it was a wonderful show, wonderful turnout. And based on that, Danny ended up getting a one-man retrospective at the African American Museum of Art. What was that, Badass?
15.
Yeah, but what was the name? Badass Art Man?
Yeah, that's the name of it, was Badass Art Man.
All right. And you are Badass Art Man.
It was more than just my work. It was my working collection also. So they had asked for the collection, the comic books, everything.
Or as I like to call it, an abstract explosion of psychedelic wonder.
Okay.
But at any rate, that's around the time Danny started saying, boy, this Philly has something going on. Boy, these Philly cats are really nice. There's something spiritually unique about this town. That compound you and your family out there have in West Philly is pretty interesting. So he started saying things like that a lot more regularly. Started getting the vibe that Danny had, the wheels were turning about his next, the next stage, the next step of his journey, his artistic and life journey. So Danny decided to close up shop in New York, bring the energy and the spirit down here to Philadelphia, which is what he did.
And we are so happy to have Danny down here. Thank you so much, Raphael, for that background on Danny and giving us some insight on pre-Philadelphia Danny.
You are extremely welcome.
So next up, we will be looking at some more work, and Danny has another poem that he would like to read for us.
Hold on. Let me see which one this is. Okay, we did Bad Things Happen in Philadelphia. Let's see one. This one's called Rabbit Hunting, Duck Hunting. Elmer Fudd went rabbit hunting, duck hunting, and rabbit is R-A-B-I-D. So let's start it. Elmer Fudd went rabbit hunting, duck hunting in Heartland's Heaven's Gate without license or law. Slam, bam, thank you, ma'am, times two, dead and vanished into the pages of the Constitution church service, hogmaw plate, past the box dinner, dye protection racket under Miss America's white petticoats that smuggled across state lines in Hamalu's rank bloomers. White wailing blood, Jesus Crip walked into Kenosha pimp camp carrying a brass knuckle cross with his fingers on the trigger. Church women twerked, coming home whippity wop, whack, slam, sloppy psalms was sung for teenage angst and bitter moonshine, offering of flash fried flesh and lost souls. The Elmer Fudd 2020 resurrection became bitter when Dickless Daddy spoke in forked tongue, tattooed sign language. Jesus wept long, wispy wailings into the burning cross courthouse night. 17 got cocked and loaded and looking for a steel cage fight. Trump, the ass backwards clown, waited at the mailbox for news and recurring Negro blues. Any kind of dead will do, repeating, duck hunting, rabbit hunting, all night long. Thank you.
So Danny, do you see a connection between your poetry that was written during this past year and the paintings?
You know, there's a connection. You know, the paintings, you know, are expressing on one level my angst about the lockdown and the environment and COVID and how we need to stay connected. I think the poetry really is talking more about, instead of the forces that are trying to bring us together, the forces that are tearing us apart. Like, you know, and they focus really on government. A lot of it focuses on Trump and his response to COVID, Trump and his response to race. So, I mean, I think they're polar opposites about the same thing going on in the environment. One is talking about, you know, how we need to be together and stay together. And this one is talking about really how this government at the time was doing so little and has done so little. And what they did was so ass backwards that all of it really has been to the detriment. And as we can see now, 400,000 dead is the result.
Yeah, it's, I was talking to someone the other day about your work and about, you know, how the interconnectedness that you're talking about in these paintings is a double-edged sword. You know, in this case, the virus that is easier to spread, but it's also social issues, you know, and unjust issues. It's easier when we are all kind of in this situation. But at the same time, it is so reassuring to know that we are still part of a community and that we're still connected to other people.
Right, definitely.
Yeah.
Just this whole virtual opening shows how we can still relate to one another, and even under circumstances, we find ways to be connected to each other. You know, I particularly hate Zoom because I can't actually be with people, but it does allow me to communicate with people and sort of make some sort of connection that is needed. Humans need to connect with each other. And so this opening and these paintings speak to that.
So before we move on, is there anything that you want to say about these particular paintings that we're looking at?
Well, if we're looking at the yellow and black one, Clarion Calling, it's really about the call to go out, really. And it's not specifically about that, but this is what I felt, that all the little dots are really points of spiritual, not necessarily connection, points of spirit. And, you know, it's about really spirit calling out, because the red thing has like a horn at the end of it. It's really about spirit calling out and calling each other to be better human beings. I guess that's the best way that I can put it. You know, every morning on Facebook, I show a psychedelic picture and say great groovy good morning, and some stating it, blah, blah. And it's really just a call to make sure that we know that there is like some beauty left in the world. People are suffering. Not everybody. A lot of people have made a lot of money off of this illness, but a lot of people are in danger of losing their homes. They've lost their jobs, they lost their businesses. And so this is really about, you know, trying to bolster people's spirits and have them find something good. So it's really a call to connect with spirit, really, to, you know, to help. I mean, your spiritual life is probably the most powerful thing that you have at this moment. And if we move downward, you know, like I said, it's hard to really speak to individual paintings because they really all are talking about the same thing in different ways, in different forms. I could say it again differently, in different manner, but they're really basically about all of what I said before. Yeah. This is another part of that triptych. There's one piece missing that is not in it, but this black and white, black and tan and white one is really about it. But it also, you know, the white and the browns and the tans also speak to race in America, also in a smaller way than the connectiveness. You know, they really speak to how we have been relating. And it's been so unsettling, not that racism is anything new in America, but the amount of virulent hate and racism that was allowed to be on display and tolerated. You know, they're very good people, you know, and you know, Trump's famous line from Charlottesville. They're very good people. We're talking about Nazis and racists and all of that. It's just brought race to a point in America where people are suspicious of each other and afraid. Really, it's created an atmosphere of fear in America. And so it's a lot of what I'm talking about when you see overlapping of black and white or black and brown or this, it's not necessarily talking about the fear, but you know, the push and pull of what's going on racially in this country.
Yeah. Thank you, Danny. Mm-hmm. So next up, we have our next special guest, Susan Cahan. Susan is an art historian, curator, educator, and a personal collector of Danny's work. Susan specializes in contemporary art and the history of museums. She has over 20 years of experience as a curator, museum professional, and educator. She is currently the Dean of the Tyler School of Art and Architecture at Temple University. Tonight, we are thrilled and honored to have Susan with us to give us her thoughts on Danny's current body of work.
Thank you, Claire. And hey, and thank you for inviting me to come and participate in this fantastic event. It's great to see you, albeit over Zoom, Danny. I'm one of the people who reads Danny's Facebook posts every morning, and they make me happy, and they remind me that we still are connected to each other. When I think about those Facebook postings in the morning, I was thinking about your painting practice, Danny, and it seems from this body of work, which clearly looks like a body of work, not a group of paintings. I see the work as appearing to be like a daily practice, like a way of working through your experiences and our experiences during this extremely difficult and difficult period that we've all been going through. And I see the paintings as being variations on some of the themes that Danny talked about. It's a stunningly beautiful show, and these are very, very poignant works. And when I first saw them, it was very clear to me that they evoke the sense of connectedness that Danny was talking about, both our yearning to be with each other and to be connected to other people, but also the dangers associated with being around, physically close to other people during the pandemic, and the silent danger that accompanies being physically with other people. Some of the titles of the pieces I think are really evocative. For example, a number of them have the title "Deadly Sweet Whispers," and those whispers to me are a kind of almost like a ghostly presence. Something that is there, but you can't see it, you can barely hear it. It's that specter of COVID-19 that we've all been living with for the last 10 months. It's many other things too, but for me, that's one of the strongest evocations. Another aspect of the paintings that I think is really phenomenal, again, is something that Danny talked about, but which I'd like to add my words to, which is the paint drips. We've all known someone who's been affected by COVID. Many of us know people who have died from it. And when I look at those paint drips, it's almost as if the paintings are weeping. And they're very poignant. I really urge everyone to actually see them in person. They're extremely poignant, and you can see the process physically when you see the paintings in person. So, at the same time that they are clearly evoking what we're going through now with the pandemic, they're also, for me, evoking the gatherings of different groups of people during these last few months. The organization that we saw all over the world and in Philadelphia last summer with the Black Lives Matter movement, but also the chaos and the chaos that we saw on January 6th at the Capitol. The sense that I get from the sense of organization of the forms, as well as their kind of chaotic element, is the suggestion that there are formations that exist within society, but that there's also the potential for reforming society, because there's a fluidity and there's an organic quality to the paintings. So I find this presentation really impactful. I was surprised at how moved I was when I saw the paintings. I think that Danny's work is becoming increasingly expressive, and I urge everybody to come and see them in person so that you can experience the collage elements and the textures and the subtleties of what's happening in these works. And again, thank you for inviting me to come here and to participate in this.
Thank you, Susan.
Thanks, Susan.
And we'll hear a little bit more from Susan in just a few minutes about her own work that she has with Danny's and what Danny means to her as far as being part of her collection. But first, we're going to hear one last poem from Danny.
Okay. This is the last poem. This book is called, and I'll talk a little bit about the book. I have a few volumes of poetry. I have I Dream My People Were Calling and Couldn't Find My Way Home, which was my first book, and it's paintings and poems. And then I did a little book of text poetry that, the size of 160 word characters, called Deep in Your Best Reflection. Then I did the Brown Beatnik tomes, and there was a standout character in the Brown Beatnik tomes called Two Dick Willie. And so I published the book Two Dick Willie of poems and paintings. And Raphael, on a take from an R. Crumb, who's one of my favorite cartoonists and illustrators, he did the cover art for that work. I should have brought him so I could show him, but I didn't. But anyway, this book is called Red, just simply Red, for two reasons. First of all, anger, because there's a lot of anger in these poems that I try to pour into these pages. But I wanted to be another little book, because when I was a teenager, and we were extremely politically active. Um, we used to carry the little red book by Mao Tse-tung. It's called the Red Book, and we read revolutionary sayings from the Red Book, and like this, that, and the other at Black Student Union meetings and all types of political meetings. And so I wanted a little book of poems, powerful poems that challenged the system. And then I did drawings for every poem. So the book is going to be 25 drawings and 25 poems. So, and a little red covered book. It's going to be, I think it's going to be pretty good. But this is the last book. And this poem is untitled so far because the book, I probably have about 3 or 4 poems left to do and 3 or 4 drawings left to do. But this is about my youth and people I've lost from my youth. And it says, I saw my homies, great greasy, and should have been gravy, dripping from smoking gun barrels in the front of the dope spot. We was 3rd grade friends ducking deeper dizzy dreamscapes on rough-ridden roads, hell-bound, singing freedom songs like they was Motown, trying to make it home before streetlights and the wine-swilling yellow moonlight. We grew apart like tree limbs, reaching out on our own towards the morning light. They crept like moss on blight, and I embraced the dream revolution and my first pair of combat boots. Bullets, berets, and thrusting fist hunger had me begging on street corners for all power to the people. Swimming against the current, black, angry, and defiant. Late for class, brilliant, busted, and doogie stalking my every step. Mind blown, gone, and weepy to the long distance run, and the fun was over. I came home no worse for wear after long hot summers of wanting and waiting to only find you lost to children's memory and the first slap 5s. It's no shame to miss you like I do. It holds me together in moments of deep despair when I sit and stare into the abyss of the graves that shouldn't have been. And so much for that. You want to hear any more of these, you're going to buy the book, Red. It should be out this spring sometime. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danny. And thank you to Raphael and Susan as well for joining us and giving us some insights on their thought on Danny's work and his history. Before we will take questions from the audience, we did want to take kind of a sidestep for a moment. In addition to being an artist of many mediums himself, visual artist and poet, Danny is also a collector and supporter of the arts. This seemed particularly important to us here at InLiquid because of our ongoing campaign, Everyone is a Collector, presented by PNC Arts Alive. Everyone is a Collector is a call of action to support local artists from the Philadelphia region, that Danny is one of, and inspire both new and established collectors to collect local art. InLiquid believes that everyone, no matter their location, career, style, or background, should be able to have art in their lives and can be a collector. Danny Simmons' personal collection of art exemplifies the goal of Everyone is a Collector by including work from a slew of local artists. So Danny, I would love to hear you talk a little bit about your own collection, and your thoughts on collecting. I do have a selection of images from your own personal collection at home that I can put on screen for people to talk about.
Let's see. I started collecting art, I guess about 27 years ago. And it started with one African mask that I happened to see that inspired me and also informed my painting process at the time. You know, I was very moved by the modernists, Picasso and Clay, and I and others, and I saw the Africanness in their work, and so I collected this Dan mask from a store owner named Nyabingi in Brooklyn, and from there it just exploded. And so my collection really is a hodgepodge of contemporary art and African art blended together. In this picture, we see, I'm not going to try to name all the African works here. There's just too many. But the painting is by Didier William, who has a studio actually in this He's a professor at Rutgers University and a great, great painter. And so the painting there that you can see is a Didier. And I also have my homie book sitting right there, Dawood Bey. We went to school together, to high school together. We rode the bus to integrate the school outside of our neighborhood. And so we were the black kids from our neighborhood being bused together. We'd be on the bus every morning together. Dawood is the recipient of MacArthur Genius Award and one of America's top photographers. I have some of his work in my collection, but that's his book right there in the corner. And we can move on to the next slide. This is a little alcove on my third floor landing, and at the top we have an artist from Atlanta, Kevin Cole, another Atlanta artist with the colorful little assemblage, Reginald Laurier. The woven sculpture is Diane Smith. Donald Locke is the painting with the black. That's Shekiah Booker's work, who usually works in rubber out of tires. We have two pieces by Gregory Coates, his inner tube paintings. We have two cans by Patrick Dower. Under the blue inner tube is a Lois Mayu Jones print, and the other one is, I can't remember his name at the time. So we're gonna have to move on. Maybe it'll come to me. This is a favorite wall of mine. The boy in the duck is Derek Adams, who's all these are great artists. My whole collection, I think, are great artists. I wouldn't have them. I love their work. That's Derek Adams. Derek ran Rush for 13 years, and he's also my cousin and probably one of the hottest artists in America at the moment, black artists in America. Then we have Renee Cox, who's an amazing photographer. It's an early work of hers, who caused all the stir with her picture of herself as Jesus that shut down the Brooklyn Museum. We have a painted photograph by Ming Smith there, the smaller one, and a Micheline Thomas print that I saw something similar at Kehinde Wiley's house, and I asked her for one, and she had this huge one printed up for me that I purchased from her. I've had it for, 2006. I think only new one there is Derek's. The other ones I've had from the early 2000s. And a bunch of art from Congo and different places. That's a Simone Lee chandelier hanging in my living room. And the photograph in the corner is Deanna Lawson, who just is going to have a show at the Guggenheim at the Guggenheim Museum in the spring. Most of these artists have shown at my gallery in New York, Rush Arts Gallery. And so that's how I got to meet most of them. And Simone was one of them. She's going to be representing the United States at the Venice Biennale. That is Ming Smith, who I talked about her photograph earlier. And that's Gordon Parks, who did this. Gordon gave me that personally. I met him through his dear friend, Adja Cowens, and used to accompany Adja up to his house. And I actually gave Gordon a painting, and Gordon reciprocated, and I got that. Saul Sachs, one of my favorite contemporary sculptors, and yeah, he's a sculptor. I guess he would be a sculptor or assemblages. He puts things together, and that's an amazing one. I have a man with a basketball head also. That's Ingrid Bars. She's a Dutch artist, and she sent that all the way from the Netherlands to us, and for a show called Naked Black Girls. But naked was spelled Neekid. We had it at Rush. There's photographers representing Black beauty, and Ingrid sent this, and I was like, well, you're not going to get that back. I'm going to buy that. So it never made it back to her. Oh, yeah. James Vanderzee. He had a few of the famous photographer. This is from, I guess, the 30s, and it's a picture of, he has a famous picture called Woman by the Fireplace. He took a couple of shots of this same woman, and that's another shot. It's not as famous as the one that everyone talks about, but it's pretty damn hot. Carol Walker. Carol Walker, we honored Carol Walker at Art for Life, which is our annual Rush fundraiser. And she created this piece of artwork, the original, we auctioned it at Sotheby's, and then there were 25 prints for donors. And I happened to be a donor, so I got one. Mike Rader, this is a little studio card that he manipulated, and he's one of the most clever artists. Mike and I go way back. He used to have a gallery in Brooklyn called Tastes Like Chicken. And I showed with Derek Adams, It Tastes Like Chicken. Mike and I went to where did we go? We went, not Amsterdam, we went to France together to do an art show. And Mike and I became really good friends on that trip and have been tight friends ever since. And this is one of his pieces. Okay, we have Willie Cole at the bottom, and we have age. I'll get back to it. I can't think of the name. Oh, Stan Squirrell. Sorry, thank you. Stan, memory popped back in. Stan Squirrell on the top, and that's on the first floor. Okay, that's the Dawood Bey photograph, the man in the bowler. And up top is Alexandria Smith, another artist who showed extensively at Rush Arts in Chelsea. This is my collection of R. Crumb stuff. R. Crumb, like I said earlier, I mentioned earlier, is one of my favorite artists. I have a story about this piece over in the corner, the white piece with the drawing on it. R. Crumb traded this drawing. He drew it on the side of somebody's truck, their van. In exchange, he's a avid record collector, 78s. And so he exchanged it for a bunch of 78s. A guy had it in Pennsylvania. The guy sold it to a guy who took it over to England. The guy in England is a member of my R. Crumb Facebook group and said he wanted to sell the car, but he didn't want to sell the thing. So I bought the panel. He had it cut out and shipped to me. And I got it framed here in Philadelphia. So this thing went from Philadelphia to England, back to Philadelphia. So, I've always wanted an original R. Crumb drawing, and this one comes with a hell of a story. It's amazing. It's a great drawing of R. Crumb, and at the bottom, he said the guy who had the albums was so high on something. At the bottom, you can't see it. It says, "Stay sober." The comic book room. This is just one shot of comics and cartoon characters and figures. I have a whole room as you enter my house of figures and comic book characters, superheroes and Jetsons and Spy versus Spy and Barbie dolls. And well, anyway, that's the comic book room on one shelf. This is the door leading to my studio. These photographs were created by a woman named Diane Waugh, and they represent a fictitious CD cover for an album called I Fall in Love Too Easily.
And I think that's all that we have. I will say, Danny, when you were sending me images of your collection, I think you sent over 50, and I was just absolutely blown away. You have such a beautiful collection.
Yeah, I just was walking around the house taking snapshots of different places. I said, I hope these will do. And they came out pretty good.
Yeah. What I do love is hearing your stories about so many of the pieces, your personal connection to them, because that is a part of collecting art, is knowing that, especially contemporary art, is knowing the artist and having, a small connection to them through collecting their work. So Susan Cahan, who spoke earlier, as well as being a distinguished museum professional and professor and dean, she's also a collector of Danny's work. And so we thought it would be lovely to have her say a few words about what it means to her to collect Danny's work.
Well, it's just fantastic collecting Danny's work. So everybody should run to InLiquid and buy some of Danny's work. But not the piece that I have my eye on, which I won't tell you what it is. You know, Danny said his collection's a hodgepodge, and I've been following private collections, and I've been, you know, acquiring things myself for decades. And to me, the best collections are, quote, hodgepodge, because it means that the choices are coming from the heart. They're not coming with a prescription. They're not coming with a program. They're not coming because other people are buying certain things. They're coming because the collector is really responding to what they're seeing. I'm really fortunate to live with this painting that you see behind me by Danny, which has a very different feel from the work in the exhibition, even though it shares some elements in common. When did we get that? Oh gosh, I can't remember. We were over at your house.
It was a barbecue. It was my birthday party or some sort of barbecue, and you surprised me and bought the painting and took it home.
Yeah, we were my husband and I were walking around Danny's house being nosy, and we went into his studio and we looked at everything in his studio. And by the time we finished looking at everything, we just couldn't part without taking something to live with ourselves so that we could look at it, because the work was so rich. And you can see from looking at the piece behind me that it's very different in tone from the work in the current exhibition. It's much lighter. It's similar in that it uses a lot of organic forms, but it evokes a very different kind of feeling. I love this piece because for me it evokes space and time. It's, you know, formally the forms are working on different planes. It's actually a collage piece. The collage is combined with paint, and the patterns evoke different cultures. From, for instance, the dots, which are reminiscent of African face painting in certain cultures, to the patterns. And I'm not sure if you can see them that well. If you put your Zoom setting on speaker view, you'll be able to see the detail of the center portion here, which looks kind of psychedelic. You know, it looks like something that is reminiscent of the 70s. And, you know, Danny, as you could tell from his reminiscences now, in my experience of him, he's somebody who carries the past with him. And he you know, the culture of the past isn't past. It's combined with the things that he's experiencing now. And so, and you know, anybody who knows him knows he really likes psychedelia. So I love the fact that this painting suggests different points in time, different points in history, different cultures, different spatial relationships. And there's one thing about the painting that I really, really love a lot. Every time I look at it, I see something new. And when I was preparing to talk with you tonight, I looked again really closely and I saw these two fabric swatches, and they're green and they have like starbursts, and they suggest the idea of a plant. They have the same, they're fabric pieces that have been cut out. They're the same shape, the same size, but one is applied to the canvas facing front, and the other one is applied facing back. So you see the back of the printed fabric. And to me, they're like a Janus face, you know, facing backward and facing forward, facing the past and facing the future. And I think that the way in which this painting gives me back more and more makes me want to live with it. You know, I look at a lot of art in my work, and I see a lot of art that I think is important, but I might not necessarily want to live with. For me, Danny's work falls into both of those categories. I think it's important. I think it's provocative, and I love living with it. You know, and I just want to close by saying that I think everybody should live with original art. I think that it's possible to do that in any price range. Multiples are usually available at, you know, pretty reasonable prices. And nowadays, there are even manufacturers and artists who are creating objects, everyday objects that you can buy and you can live with. There's a group that a few years ago was, they were making beach towels with artists' works on them. So, you know, I encourage everybody to live with art. It just enriches your life so much. But I want to close by just saying that I want to circle back to Danny's current show, because I'm still feeling almost choked up about how disarmingly expressive these current works are. And I know a lot of you know Danny, and you know that he can be disarming. He can be disarming in his honesty, in his irreverence, in this case, in his expressivity, and in his love. So thank you, Danny. It's a delight and a joy and a privilege to live with your work, which I see and contemplate every day. So thank you.
See, you got me blushing over here. Thank you, Susan. That's all I can say. Thank you for that.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Susan. And thank you, both of you, for taking a minute to talk about your own collections. You know, so, but really thank you to Danny, Raphael, and Susan, and to all of you in the audience who've been hanging on so tight here. We would like to open up the forum, and I'm giving you right now the ability to unmute yourselves and start your video. And that way, if you have any questions or comments that you want to say directly to Danny, you can do so. If you would prefer, you can still also send your questions through the chat function, and I can ask them on your behalf. So while we're waiting for everyone to get turned on who want to, I have a question that we received earlier for Danny about, there's a comment about how, you know, this seems like a good moment in America for poetry. You know, we just had that beautiful poem at the inauguration. You know, and so I'm curious, you were involved, you know, in Def Jam Poetry on HBO, you know, and how you see that having changed the landscape of poetry in America.
Well, I mean, poetry has always been, you know, an important part of art and culture. You know, as long as I can remember, my father used to walk around the house reciting his poetry. So it's been a part of my life, my entire life. So, I mean, when the poetry explosion of the 90s, the spoken word, I guess, explosion, I used to have spoken word artists come to the gallery as a way to bolster the show and bring new eyes and new audiences into the gallery. And a poet and a poetry producer and my partner at the time, Bruce George, wanted desperately to make a TV show. And it wasn't my idea to make it a TV show, to start a TV show. I had enough on my plate. But Bruce was insistent. And so I brainstormed and figured out that our best chance of having this done is to rebrand Russell's Def Comedy Jam as Def Poetry Jam and try to sell it back to HBO. And so we were able to pull it off. HBO, we created a number of showcases for HBO, and eventually we ended up at the Aspen Comedy Festival, where it was the biggest ticket there. And HBO gave us a number of shows to pilot, 7 shows for the first season, and it ran for a bunch of seasons. And we won a Peabody Award, which was amazing. And it became HBO's biggest show. And then from there, we took it to Broadway and won a Tony Award. But really the question that you asked is how's it changed? universities and schools started teaching poetry. I've been a host the community college here in Philadelphia with a poetry group with Yellow Rage, Michelle, who was one of the poets who went with me to Aspen to sell the show to HBO and to make sure HBO wanted to make sure that, it had legs for all of America. And she does a wonderful thing called Drop the Mic. And their kids are now, taking poetry electives. And then we look up and we see Amanda Gorman just wow the entire world with her poem. God, I wish she was around when we were doing deaf poetry. I would have definitely had her on the show. But I mean, poetry is an important way to express all types of things. I saw it as a vehicle for people to express civil discontent and push forward ideas of change in ways that people could take it in and understand it and digest it. So, I mean, I'm glad that my pushing poetry has had such a positive effect on the poet landscape. Of course, I'm nowhere near the first. I grew up listening to Last Poets and Mary Baraka and Sonia Sanchez, and there were so many strong and powerful poets. I just, created a vehicle to push it out further outside of cafes and outside of intelligentsia to the general public, and HBO was the vehicle.
Thank you, Danny. Does anyone from the audience have another question that they'd like to ask themselves? If not, I do have a list here.
I have a question.
Okay.
Well, first of all, I want to say, Danny, I'm super inspired by your work in this exhibit. I think it's absolutely stunning. I'm also blown away by your own personal collection, and I think that being able to see that and see your work in conjunction is really so fascinating, because I think it's also so interesting how an artist's own work is informed by their collection and vice versa. And my question is more about our kind of sidetrack to InLiquid's Everyone is a Collector campaign, because your collection is so inspirational, but also very aspirational. And I guess I want to know from your perspective, what kind of advice you might offer to a new collector who might see a collection like yours that they would aspire to and dream about, but not know where to begin.
Well, yeah, like I said earlier, I started by collecting with an African mask. A lot of my collecting came to me early on through running Rush Arts Gallery. I collected a lot of the artists that showed there as a tribute to them. I traded a lot as a painter myself. I traded a lot with artists and still trading with artists all the time, all the time.
Yeah.
So, but I think the answer that really the most powerful one is you really have to collect what you like. Luckily, sometimes when you collect what you like has great gains monetarily. You might buy something for $2,000, and 10 years later it's $50,000. Depending on artists. Or you might buy something and just still have it just because you like it. But it always starts with what you like and what you feel. And it's not necessarily, you have to figure out how you like something. Do you like it intellectually? Do you like it spiritually? How does this thing come to you? And what about it? And so, the things that I collected came to me, not necessarily because they were great artists at the time or this, that, and the other. It came to me because some sort of connection was made between me and the object. And, and so I have very wide different things. I feel as much as for an R. Crumb drawing as I do for a 300-year-old African sculpture. They both speak to me at different parts of me. So my range is wide. Find out what you like and why you like it, because it can take you in many different directions. There's no one thing you should collect unless that's what you want to do. But, don't limit yourself.
Thank you.
I do love, as a more of a note, you know, your collection really is such a good mix of, old and new and local and from, Africa, and such a good mix. And Raphael was talking about your parties you used to have in New York City, and talking about how like your apartment became the island of misfit toys, and you also seem to collect people and want to be surrounded by people similarly as diverse. And that was just something that I thought was really enjoyable. That you just like the array of different people just like art.
Well, I think, if you try to be open-minded, you find something in everything that you can connect to, you know. And so different people are from all kinds of different walks of life. I have such an eclectic group of friends. So I have like doctors, lawyers. I also have guys that spent 40, 30 years in the army, made a career in the army, all types of people, you know, it's not what they did or what they like. There's something about individual human beings that if you can connect with them, we're all pretty much the same on a certain level. And if you can get past the bullshit, you're gonna find a lot about most people that you'll like. And that way they can influence you and you can influence them.
Yeah, that's great. So I do have a question from Julia Chance. She says, hello.
Oh, okay.
She's wondering if you've ever considered writing a book about collecting contemporary Black art or Black art in general.
No. I have a couple of books in mind. I wrote a novel years ago called 3 Days as the Crow Flies, that has to be finished. I mean, the first novel was published by Simon and Schuster, and then we did a graphic novel about it. And it's about the Lower East Side in the '80s, and and art and sex and drugs and all of that. There's the second part of that novel that's been in my head for the last 10 years that I have to write. And then everybody's and myself, I really want to document my life as sort of an autobiography. I've done a whole lot of different crazy shit that I think people really would enjoy reading about. I don't think that I know enough outside of my intuitiveness about collecting to really write the type of, I can write my experience this with collecting, but I don't think that I have enough academic, the well of academic knowledge about collecting, to enjoy doing that. I could probably study and figure it out really easily, but no, it's not my lane.
So Lisa, I saw you had your hand up and you've been waiting so patiently. So do you have a question you want to go ahead with?
Hey Danny, it's good to see you, first of all.
Hey, what's up?
I wanted to know, is this body of work finished? Or are you moving in a different direction now?
Well, you know what happened? I don't know if it's finished, but I haven't done a painting in probably 2 months. And Raphael was going to speak. I spent so much time in the studio with painting, and my studio didn't have enough ventilation. I started getting real dizzy from paint fumes and stuff like that. I had to back up off it for a while because I think, with the paint thinner and the turpentine, I was really, I mean, I went and had heart tests and all that stuff. And then I started doing all these drawings for this book, and found myself, I hadn't done drawings in years. And so I was doing all these drawings and I was like just so pleased with them. So I might, when I go back to painting, I don't know what's going to come out. It might be finished. I don't know. Usually the paint takes me somewhere. If we come out of this pandemic, and I say if, but or when we come out of this pandemic, I think the subject matter of what's going on in my life will change it some.
Yeah, I love it, by the way. It's amazing. And I hope to see you soon.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, and as a reminder, everyone, our gallery is open by appointment only for now. We are allowing up to 5 people to come at a time. mask required. Danny's an exception right now just for the opening. But I'm trying to put the link through the chat so you can make an appointment yourself and come see the works because they really are so phenomenal in person. So Ashina, you seem to be next with your hand raised if you want to go ahead.
Absolutely, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Danny, I just wanted to tell you, just congratulations, brother. You know you're important. It's was 7 a.m. in Bali here, and I logged in. So I woke up to you, brother. What a wonderful blessing. Just want to quickly get to it. My grandmother used to always, remind me and remind us, all of us in the South Bronx at that time, about conviction and convenience, not living on the same side of the street. Your work is never convenient because it forces you to really stretch the fringes of your mind and of your heart. But I'm more concerned with conviction as an educator in New York City, a building leader. Just wanting your ideas and your thoughts on how we can really just help our children with expanding their minds and expanding their hearts in the arts, because I've noticed that art just brings something out of every child. You can go into a classroom of kindergartners and everybody wants to be an artist, but when you go to that same in that same school to a class of fifth graders, you might have one. So any thoughts on how we can continue to infuse arts and education to really bring about the changes we wish to see in our world?
Well, with Rush, every Saturday morning, we have a virtual art class. It starts at 11 New York time. I hear you say you're in Bali. So we've been having art education classes. I started this 2 years after I opened Rush in 1995. This is our 25th year. So for 23 years, we've been educating kids every Saturday morning. We were in New York City, we were in 7 schools. We had thousands of kids. Kids have grown up to become teachers, become art teachers. So, I mean, art changes kids' lives, it changes communities, all the things that we all know. We just have to, kids will find a way. We have to give them a pen and paper, and sit them down and be with them, and they will create and they will learn, and their imagination will expand, and they will be empowered by the experience. Raphael has taught our classes. We have another woman, Pauline, who teaches this Saturday morning. We're about to open an adult class where adults and kids create together. So, I mean, we have to find the venues and create the classes, and the kids will come. We have kids now. We just had kids from the neighborhood coming. Now we have kids, because it's virtual, from all over the world, signing in on Saturday mornings, listening to our art classes. And what we do is when we raise money, we send each kid, so there's no disparity, the same art supplies. So you get a pad, and you get watercolors, and you get pencils, and you get this, and every kid uses the same thing. So you don't have kids with more means, kids with less means, and not being able to create in the same way. So we try to make sure that kids are empowered in that way, that they all start from the same place, from their creative soul, and not because they have any disparity in wealth. So, and art will level the playing field amongst these kids from all kinds of backgrounds.
What a great answer.
Thank you.
And I will say, Danny, that I think just by being you, that you're also helping the next generation, because you're such a good role model of an artist. And I think it's important that, kids, especially kids, can be role models, and that you can actually be an artist. It's achievable. So we do have a quick question from the chat. Liz was wondering if you had any suggestions on young or emerging poets that you think have particularly strong voices.
I really am not going to I don't like doing that, singling out individuals and, that you say, well, this one or that one. I would say, see Michelle at Drop the Mic, these kids at Philadelphia Community College. They have some amazing, amazing poets, and every year or so we do a Deaf Poetry Jam reunion. We did a Deaf Poetry Jam reunion at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, which really 800 people showed up. And then it was live streamed too. I don't know how many people live streamed it, but we had 800 people listening to poetry. I don't want to say, oh, this one's great and that one's great. I've always been against competition and ruling people, like that. But I will say that we have amazing youth poets that are out there, and you can find them yourselves and decide who you think is the best or who's not the best.
Great. So next up we have Tanji with her hand up.
Hi, hello from New Orleans. How are you? This is Tangi. Danny, I have one quick question as the kind of follow up to a comment that you made. Mm-hmm. What happens if we do not come out of this pandemic?
I don't know.
That's it.
One of the things that I'm confident that we will, but anything's anything. I think that the way we've been living, we've sort of found ways to work around with this social isolating. I think masks are probably going to stay with us for a while. I think even after the vaccines is going to stay with us for a while. So, eventually we'll come out, I believe we will come out of it, but it's going to take some time. I think that we have adjusted and are adjusting daily to the fact that, we have to be more vigilant in how we interact with each other. And it's terrible. It's terrible. This thing came out of nowhere and changed entirely the way we live. And so, we have to sort of adapt in order to stay safe. I think people are going to have to be tested more often, and they're definitely going to have to wear masks, and, until some sort of all clear whistle is blown. But I was reading an article this morning and saying that this will be with us for a few years. Maybe not as virulent and maybe not as, pandemic, but that this thing is going to circulate for a while.
That's a scary thought.
It really is. Hopefully they'll be able to treat it better, and hopefully this vaccine will work. I know one of the things that people are really afraid of this vaccine, vaccines in general, but I'm going to take it because I'm more afraid of catching COVID than I am of a vaccine.
Yeah. So next up we have Gail, and then Tanisha, I think you're next. But Gail, if you wanted to unmute yourself and ask your question.
I just want to say congratulations, Danny. This is Gail Jackson from Jamaica. Thank you so much.
I saw your name, Gail. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
God, I miss you so much.
I know. I'm really impressed with your work. Thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome. Thank you, Gail. I'll tell Kia that you came on.
Okay, thanks.
I love how international our crowd is tonight. We have Jamaica, we have Bali. So, Tanisha, I think you're next.
Well, first I want to show off my Danny Simmons. Since other people are showing off their Danny Simmons work, I'm standing in front of mine.
Let me make you big so people can see it better. There we go.
Oh, it's time for a new one, Tanisha.
I know, and I have one in my office too. This is in my house. So, but my question, first of all, congratulations, Danny. I love you, and I'm so excited about this focus on your own work. But my question really is about your support of other artists. I know, and I came in a little late, but I suspect that there was conversation about, you back in the day really having those parties and supporting artists. And I just want to know why that was important to you. I mean, you could have just focused on your own work. And again, I'm excited that there now seems to be a focus on your own work because you spent so much time advocating for other artists. And I'm curious about that. I'm just curious, why was that so important to you? Because you were the place to go as an artist, your house.
I think probably I can credit my father with it. I went to school and I got my master's degree to be a social worker. So my father was a social worker for a while. He had me out civil rights demonstrations at 6 years old. When I was younger than that, he used to work in the weekends at a children's shelter, and he used to take me there. He made me understand what it is to give something back and how important it was. He had a famous line that he dropped on me and Russell and Ron all the time. He was like, it's incumbent upon you who's been given a lot. And by a lot, we had middle class family. My father worked for the Board of Ed. My mother worked for New York City and the Parks Department. They both went to college. So, we had enough. We didn't need anything. And that was a big deal, to have enough. And he said, it's incumbent upon you who don't have to worry about anything in your life to make sure that you do something to help other people. And that stuck with me, and so I became a social worker first. And then I think because I loved art, I extended that in some way into creating this nonprofit Rush Philanthropic Arts Foundation to help artists. And part of it, wasn't really selfish reasons, but at the time when I created it in 1995, there weren't very many opportunities and venues that showed artists of color. And so I just thought, if there are none here, let me create one. And it started out giving shows at my house and expanded to created the nonprofit. Now we're here 25 years later. But I have to reveal something. Tanisha, this was a infomercial, because Tanisha is the president of the board of directors of
Real question, Dan. We've actually never talked about it.
You're the president of the board of Rush.
Real question. We never.
It wasn't a real question. You knew the answer. You knew the answer. You just came on to big me up. But I appreciate it.
In all fairness, several people.
That's my girl. She helped me produce Deaf Poetry at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. We produced Deaf Poetry together. She knows my philosophy. We've talked about it for years. So, this was just a way for her to get this out so I could tell other people about it. But she knew it wasn't a real question.
Well, several audience members said that they love that question. They love your answer. So thank you, Tanisha, for asking a good question.
Thank you, Tanisha, for that commercial, the Danny commercial.
Well, next up is Amari, and hopefully they have a quote unquote real question. So Amari, if you want to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hey, Danny, I don't know if I have a real question for you now that you said it like that. Hi.
This is Amari from Brooklyn.
From Brooklyn, right down the street, one of your originals.
Hey,
I'm just, I'm good. I'm listening to this and I'm just like, wow, time flies, because you said 3 days as the crows fly. All your original stuff from back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
You see this? It's like, I did that shot of you from way back at the studio. But, in listening to all the dialogue that's taken place and really appreciating the work, someone asked the question, do you think we'll come out of this? And of course, I love the answer that you gave, always hope. So my question regarding Rush Philadelphia, because I'm not on Facebook, so I don't get to see your morning psychedelic madness and empowerment stuff. But I'm curious, since I've been out of that loop, like, are you using the online presence to sort of create a new community, because we are so isolated as artists now? More so with this this global, it feels like, lock that's taking place. Like, how is Rush utilizing online presence for artists to connect?
Well, we have 4 distinct programs that Rush is doing. One is, we just discussed, is the children's program. The other is studio visits called Rush Tales. And we have artists walk you through their studios talking about their work. And it's a self-propelled thing where artists either have themselves or their family filming their work and talking about it. And we edit it and put it up on YouTube and play it for a month or so, and, and promote it. We also have had artist talks where we've had like a chat room, like StreamYard, I guess it would be, discussing art practices, and then we put up artists of the week, or profiles of different artists that we publish on Facebook and Instagram and other social media platforms. So we're doing our best to try to continue to empower artists and allow the public access to artists creating work, and hopefully they'll make connections and sell some artwork and continue to live and eat and breathe and do whatever they got to do. We're finding our way like everybody else. We raise money with 501(c), and we raise money to do that, to try to empower children and artists. And so we're continuing, we're just doing it in a different way now. Hopefully, like Anthony Carlos will have our first virtual show, and hopefully we won't have too many more virtual shows. We might continue them afterwards, and we're going to definitely continue the Saturday morning thing, even when kids can come back in the gallery, because now we've realized we can reach kids everywhere with this. Right. Bali,
Jamaica.
Get Russell over there to do some yoga with some kids online. But this online platform has so many possibilities of touching people's lives virtually that we're going to explore now that we know that it's effective. And these kids are creating things. Right now we have a wall that's going up of protest posters that artists and kids done. We're going to install it on the outside of Rush Arts in Logan, and we're just doing what we're doing. We're doing the best. Doing the best we can.
So do you think that the online presence has more impact for the arts to reach more people in terms?
Oh yeah, definitely has more impact. But it's all well and good. I don't think there's anything quite like being in a packed opening with people, shoulder to shoulder, or engaging with a piece of art directly. It's a different experience than an online experience. I think that it virtual takes a little bit away from the actual spiritual aspect of it.
Okay.
Art openings, you meet friends, you do this, you do that, you go out for dinner afterwards, you hug, you meet girls, you meet guys, you do this, you do that. I mean, it's a whole experience in an art gallery that goes on that can happen virtually. You can see the art, you can discuss the art like we're doing now, and it helps, but it's not the same as having an opening.
Okay. Well, hopefully we'll come out of this.
Hopefully we will.
Keep hope alive. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you again for everyone who has been here with us today, from the audience to Danny's special guests, Raphael and Susan, to Danny himself. And thank you for sticking with us through the opening of Danny Simmons Studio Time. And a very special thank you to PNC Arts Alive for presenting InLiquid's Everyone's a Collector campaign and programming.
All right, folks, thank you. This has been wonderful. I've had a great time. And thank you so much, InLiquid, for allowing me this opportunity to talk to people and show my work and show my collection. It's been amazing.
Our pleasure, Danny.
Bye.
Bye.
I like your sweatshirt, Danny.
Can you read what it says?
It says art harder, motherfucker. Yeah, I can read it.
Yeah, I just happened to throw this on. Yeah. I thought it was appropriate.
Uh-huh.
Oh, wow. Let's have some fun, guys.
Is there any other way with you?
I hope that I'm serious sometimes, but not often.